the kids that I work with from 4th grade through 8th grade, some of them chose to work with Ruby as their language in Sonic Apply. And they really enjoyed creating with that. But one of the questions that I kind of had that I never really got an answer for was, how are they going to feel when they transfer from a higher level language to a lower level language versus going from lower to higher? Because for myself, having to learn the syntax nightmare that was C++, it made it so when I got to like something like Ruby, I was like, wow, this is super easy.
Everything, this is like super simple. Yeah.
Yeah. But going the other direction, I wonder if it'd be even more confusing.
Yeah. This is one where I feel like people like David Weintraub are really kind of trying to push to really understand. Mark Grisdale too, I think is thinking a lot about like, is it the language? Is it the applications? Like, where do we want to be spending our time also in formal education settings? Like if the point is not CS for its own sake, but CS for something else that we're doing, like, do you really want to spend all your time learning, syntax of even like a Python like language, right?
Yeah. So Mark was on episode 86. And Andreas Stefik was on episode 27. And what was fascinating about that conversation with Andreas is he mentioned a study that they did where they used a placebo language that had random characters to see if a programming language did better or worse than the placebo. And some of them did worse. Just like random collection of characters for like a for loop or for whatever. That's no good.
Really funny. I don't know the answer to this. And like, I thought a little bit about it. It hasn't really been my main kind of like emphasis. Well, and Mark Grisdale might disagree with me here, but I worry a little bit about like that the languages condescend to kids as they get older when it's kind of drag and drop a little bit. That if we're teaching high school students Scratch, and I want to be cautious here because like I don't have the data, like so that this is like just me like wondering. We've been working with Python with 5th grade students for a while now, and it works. Some kids are still learning how to type. Some kids don't know how to copy paste, so there are it's much slower for them, but there are lots of 5th graders who, are flying, right? And they're ready, and they've been doing Scratch or Tinker or Code.org for years now, and they're ready. But this is kind of like the literacy as identity sort of thing, where it's like, there are communities where it's sort of like the things that look really technical and complex is like part of the identity experience that like, if you like, audio engineers, I think are, they've got their Ableton Live, saws up, and there's like,
that's what I'm recording on.
10 billion LEDs flashing, like cables everywhere, like, and that's kind of like a badge of honor. Like it is, to be taken seriously as an audio engineer, you sort of give off this like, and the truth is you probably don't need all that visual complexity, like to do a good job with it.
Right.
So I kind of wonder about the identity related aspects of that. I think we tend to want to not intimidate students with languages that feel like, too technical and complex. But I think there's a flip side in that I think some students really want to have that sort of that visual image. It's like, it's all like about appearances, but I think in some ways like appearances and identity, like it's very important. Right? Like that. The tools that I use are part of my identity. And so anyway, those are things I wonder about. I don't have any answers.
That's a great wonderment. I mean, especially in middle school and high school, there's insecurity is something that you really have to consider when working with kids because they don't want to be perceived as uncool or lesser than their peers or the groups they want to associate with.
Right.
So if they're using a language that they might consider like a quote baby language, like block-based,
right,
they might have lower social status than if they're using something that is considered to be more professional and less of a baby language.
Right.
Even though it might be able to do the same thing or be easier, there is that like social status involved with it. So I think that's an important thing to consider.
Yeah.
Which is, again, is like why I focused on having multiple platforms, multiple languages. You pick which one you want.
And it's really easy, really, really easy, I think, to genderize students to sort of say like, girls are not going to like the Ableton Live kind of experience that, they want, like we don't, it's not that explicit or overt, but there are much more subtle ways in which we act that I think, genderize the experience, racialize the experience. I think we're studying languages from a very cognitive perspective, like how does this help us learn? What's the right trajectory, like to sort of make the learning curve as smooth as possible, as opposed to thinking about like languages from an identity perspective and in a sort of an affective perspective. How do I feel? Like, how do I present when I'm sort of seen coding with this language.
That's interesting. This excerpt of the CSK8 podcast was from episode 189, which is titled Computational Literacies with Michael Horn. You can listen to this episode as well as hundreds more by simply searching for the CSK8 podcast on your favorite podcast app.